Welcome back. Here are other major diplomatic events that happened in the year.
2016 began with a focus on terrorism, as Saudi Arabia executed 47 people for terror charges on the second day of the year. Among those executed was prominent Shia Muslim cleric Nimr al-Nimr. His death sparked angry protests across the Middle East, with protesters in Tehran storming the Saudi embassy. Saudi Arabia cut ties with Iran the next day because of it. That same week, North Korea announced it had successfully conducted a test of a miniatured hydrogen nuclear device. State television said the test had caused a 5.1 magnitude earthquake near the nuclear site. The international community had a hard time at first determining whether the claims were true. Terror attacks in Burkina Faso also put Africa on the map for terror alerts. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the blast at SPLENDID Hotel, where they held 30 people hostage, including the Labour minister.
Iran has honored its commitments to alter and, in fact, dismantle much of its nuclear program in compliance.
Meanwhile, the United States confirmed it was lifting nuclear sanctions over Iran after the International Atomic Energy Agency verified that the country had fully implemented its requirements under the nuclear deal, a culmination of months of diplomatic contacts, secret talks, and legal maneuvering. Fighting against the Islamic State continued in 2016, with Russia taking sides with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad with its air campaign against the terrorists. Russia's intervention tipped the balance of the war in the president's favor, reversing gains made by the rebels in 2015. 2016 also saw an intensity in the fight against the Islamic State, especially in the city of Aleppo, Syria's second largest. As the lives of millions stood in a balance, a number of peace deals were made with the rebels, but they fell through and fighting continued. It was not until towards the end of the year that two ceasefire deals eventually allowed scores of people to leave the city for neighboring towns where they were given food, medicine, and shelter. While the United Nations stepped in a number of times for the sake of the Syrian people, the tension between the United States and Russia continued to rise. Meanwhile, Turkey became a major target for the terrorists. The first major attack happened in the capital Ankara, as 37 people died, 125 more wounded when a suicide car bomb tore through a transport hub. In July, the Istanbul ATATURK airport was attacked. Gunshots, screams and explosions rent the air when 3 terrorists armed with bombs and guns killed at least 36 people. There were more terror attacks in Turkey after that. That same month, the Turkish government announced it had foiled an attempted coup. A general cleansing followed as suspects were picked up from the army, the government, and the private institutions all over the country. 40,000 people were detained, including at least 10,000 soldiers, 15,000 education staff, and 2,745 judges. During the coup, over 300 people were killed, and more than 2,100 were injured. Government buildings were also damaged. Terror attacks became more prominent in Europe. Belgium experienced its first 2 major attacks in which 35 people were killed and over 300 wounded. 3 suicide bombers were behind explosions that rocked the Brussels airport and a rush-hour metro train in Brussels. It sent shockwaves across Europe and around the world, with EU leaders holding emergency meetings on Europe's security operation and flaws in police surveillance. But it also prompted more European participation in the war against the Islamic State. 2016 saw the largest number of migrations to Europe via the Mediterranean. Europe's migrant crisis was a major topic during the year, as a record 1.3 million people applied for asylum. That was the record by August. But by the end of the year, the number of people who had come by sea had increased considerably. Some European countries fought back by shutting their borders, creating a backlog of migrants for their neighbours. The Europeans made a deal with Turkey and Greece on documentation of the visitors. Ankara was to take back all migrants and refugees, including Syrians, who cross to Greece illegally across the sea. In turn, the EU would take in thousands of Syrian refugees directly from Turkey and reward it with more money. Earlier, visa-free travel and faster progress in EU membership talks. While European countries hailed the deal as a game changer, Amnesty International decried it as a historic blow to human rights, saying Europe was turning its back on refugees. Greece became overwhelmed with the growing number at a refugee camp. So did France. Conditions at the camps became unbearable and the possibility of an epidemic increased. France shut down the one in Calais after it moved those with documents out into the country and other parts of Europe. Germany, on the other hand, took at least 1 million migrants. Though society fought back, Chancellor Angela Merkel said she would not turn them back. Months later, Germany would also become a target for the terrorists. Over in the Americas, US President Barack Obama made a historic visit to Cuba in March, 15 months after he and President Raul Castro agreed to end 5 decades of Cold War era animosity that began soon after Cuba's 1959 revolution and work to normalize relations.
Cuba y la revolución cubana seguirían luchando y seguirían resistiendo.
7 months after Cuba and the rest of the world would say goodbye to leader of the revolution, Fidel Castro. Castro was admired by many around the world, especially in Latin America and Africa, for standing up to the United States, instituting free education and healthcare, and sending doctors around the world on missions of mercy. Others, however, vilified him as a dictator who ruined the economy with his brand of socialism and denied Cubans basic human rights such as freedom of speech. Meanwhile, the US elections made major headlines around the world as former First Lady and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton lost to billionaire businessman Donald Trump in the electoral vote. Trump had campaigned on a pledge to take the country on more isolationist, protectionist America first. He has promised to impose a 35% tariff on goods exported to the United States by US companies that went abroad. Trump is preparing to begin leading the United States come January 20.
That's a program this week. I'm glad you could join us. Don't forget, our Twitter handles remain the same if you want to drop us a comment. I am Amarachi Ubani. Have a great week.